There.
We are all set to go.
Ready, Heather? Okay, I will call this meeting to order of the Planning Commission of the City of Bowling Green. Thank you for coming this evening, so close to the holiday here. We hope to not have any fireworks tonight. Chase, you want to call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Body,
Yes.
Ms. Broadwell,
Here.
Ms. Ennis,
Here.
Mr. McComber,
Here.
Mr. Phillips,
Here.
Mr. Stalter,
Here.
and Mr. Waddle.
Here.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes from our June 4th meeting. Those have been passed out to everybody ahead of time and had a chance to review them. Are there any corrections or additions or deletions to those minutes? Okay, sounds like everything's good there. So the minutes are approved from the June 4th meeting as they were passed out to us. We move right along to lobby visitation. Chance for citizens to express their thoughts to us on any matter that's on the agenda or not on the agenda tonight. Does anybody want to come up and say anything? All right, as I thought. So we will close lobby visitation. Moving right along to our annexation request. We have an annexation request for 67.692 acres located along the 14,000 block of Bishop Road, identified as parcel numbers R63-510-120102034000, R63-510-120102032000, R63-510-120000240000, and R63-510-120000, yeah, 27000 from Plain Township. Robert W. Maurer, agent. Duggan Flow LLC, Robert W. Maurer and Maurer Family Farms LLC petitioners. Heather, you want to tell us about this request?
Sure. As you mentioned, this does consist of 4 parcels, 2 parcels to the north of Bishop and 2 parcels to the south of Bishop, more directly on that corner that of Bishop and Brim. The agent is Robert Maurer. On behalf of the petitioners, Doug and Flo LLC and Robert W. Maurer and Maurer Family Farms LLC. The petitioners, this was approved by the Wood County Commissioners on May 15th of this year, and the city received the copies of the petition and related documents on May 27th to review. The property is contiguous to the city limits, where you'll see along Brim Road, just south of Bishop. Annexation is required for utility services per our city ordinances. As I understand it, they are interested in marketing the property for residential use or subdivision. However, I can't tell you specifically that they have anything in mind. I know they've requested the R2 medium density residential, which we'll talk about later. But again, I'm not aware of any, immediate development, just that they are interested in residential.
Okay. So there's some property on each side of Bishop Road, north and south?
Correct. So that map that was in your map and I have on the screen, basically it's contiguous there at the south, that would be the southwest corner of Brim and Bishop. And then if you go to the north there, the other 2 parcels would be across to the north of Bishop Road.
Okay.
But they're applying, 2 different petitioners, or 3 different petitioners, but it would all be contiguous, annexed together.
Yeah, and it's all farmland right now.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody have any comments or questions for Heather?
Heather, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now, Abhishek, you brought up a point.
Yeah. And
Let's see if I say this correctly. The gist of it was that you had seen some research that indicated that annexation to municipal properties in situations like this isn't necessarily beneficial to the municipality. That the cost associated with servicing the property and the residents may outweigh the benefits of annexing that property.
Correct.
That's the gist of the research?
You got it right, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah, so in just more from an educational perspective, and actually this came to my thought because I was like, we looked at this request in April, similar request of annexation this year. We also looked at the request, and I was not present in that meeting in January. So we have done, this will be our third annexation request in this year. So as you mentioned, Bob, and it's not, pretty common sense, right? There is a cost to taking the sewer utilities out there to any new property. And then if the revenue is not increasing proportionately, then that puts a burden on the city. And oftentimes the revenue going to increase in 5, 10, maybe 15 years. And within that time, when the utilities come to that property, the owners may change their mind from R2, well, essentially the amount of people living is proportional to the revenue which will be generated is also proportional to the cost. But sewer line will go the same amount, right? It's 10 people taking it, 15 people will not make a difference. So there is a decent amount of research there about that, oftentimes it leads to profit seeking and rent seeking. From R2, it may change their mind, and we have to be a little bit more careful about what is the cost. So a couple of things, right? I kind of got into this a little bit, but not too much. I've got wife and kids, things to do at home too. I try to look at what is the criteria of Wood County commissioners to accept a request. And it seems to me that and you got to educate me here, and I couldn't find the meeting. It's like I own a property and I go to the commissioners and I say, well, I like my city to be annexed and there's a master plan. They pretty much say, sure, right? Is what the process like?
Yes, as far as I know, it's actually part of the Ohio Revised Code, how annexations are handled. There are 4 types of annexations. The most common tend to be the type 2 expedited annexations, and all of them require property owner signatures, so to be the petitioner. And I think that's why pretty much when it gets to the county level, it's like, well, the owner desires to do that. It doesn't impact us as a county. I know for a lot of years, we've had an agreement with the adjacent townships that they do have, they get financial reimbursement annually. I can't speak directly to what that looks like, but if you have any further questions, I know our administrator is here. So they've worked out that agreement several decades ago that there would be compensation, and our actual ordinances require annexation for city utility services. And you've probably heard that before. It's the same thing in a lot of communities to, try to enhance that growth and look at, how do we get the income tax base here? It's often driven by the need for utilities. So I don't know if that kind of helps. I mean, but it's basically done by the ORC. The Ohio Revised Code is how it's dictated. And then we only mention it when it comes to, again, our requirements for annexation for utility services. And then again, in our zoning code, when it comes to the planning commission involvement and reviewing it, and then city council.
Sure. So it seems to me that the commission would essentially look at every party involved is in agreement. They look at the titles and pretty much, they are not doing any cost benefit analysis, right?
Correct.
They're not thinking about how much revenue will this property bring to the city. They're essentially passing that to us as planning commission and eventually to the city council to make that judgment whether this will be a positive thing or maybe drain on the resources there. Okay, so that makes.
And I will add that we do send every petition to our administrative staff, all the departments to review. So we do request comments if there are any red flags or concerns. We do ask that they let us know. We've talked internally about having a more robust process. It's just very complicated. It's very hard to measure the pros and cons of annexation because some of them aren't measurable. So do you want to grow your population? Do you want the next Little League coach, to be part of our community, or the next, workforce? It's hard to measure those types of pros and put a number to them. It's hard to know what development's coming because, like I said, they are interested in residential, but we don't know what kind besides their request for the R2 zoning, which would mean you could have townhomes, or basically you could share a wall or have one-unit dwellings. So that's really as much measurement as we can get when it comes to the zoning. But you could also have an adult daycare facility. It's pretty broad, some of those uses. So it's very hard to measure annexation for many reasons.
Sure, and I can just make few points and then I'll open up for discussion. Actually, this kind of has been on my mind for a bit because there has been a lot of discussion about having more affordable housing. And if you look at the new housing in BG, it's over $400,000. I mean, $350 is considered to be cheap now. And a lot of families, including mine, would not have been able to afford a house. We live in a great house, it's an old house if it was $350, right? So there was this, I think it happened last year, that we approved a housing which was set for $225,000. I think Trifecta was the construction company from Cleveland. We actually had someone in our audience who actually said, don't do this, this is expensive. And I thought $225,000 would be an affordable price to have a house. There was an article about it in BG Independent News. After several years, actually, the price of the construction became $375. And I kind of felt a little betrayed there because they did $225, it seems feasible, and then, of course, the price increases by $150,000 and becomes $375,000. To me, that is not an affordable house. So if we connect these joint points together, so nobody's denying that the city has to grow and these things look good and there's an attraction of the families, but I think we can put the cost to what will it be to have an R3 versus R2 versus R1, and what it will take to take the utilities and services there, and also drain on the resources. There's a long-term cost to it because the services have to get spread more, right? Fire and police and other things. It's not just about one-time investment. So to me, I think we need to have some robust discussion about this and what are the process moving forward. And then the other question is, what are about other properties around it, right? So we have already seen 2 requests, right? And it's essentially from the same petitioner. Is there a master plan in place? Like, can we do 2 or 3 of them together, which may lead to economies of scale and maybe reduce the cost of doing that kind of work rather than every 2 or 3 months we see one coming. So to me, there are some of the thoughts for us to think about and have a discussion about these because it's certainly tied to affordability and also drain on the resources of the city.
Anybody else have any comments?
The only question I had was, Heather, those properties, if I'm reading this right, the properties north of Bishop and east of the annexation request, that strip of properties, have they spoken with the city at all? Has there been any interest whatsoever to annex that strip as well? And what are the, thinking about the continuation of how things tie together, does it make any sense to go forward with looking to do that if, does the city think about doing that versus having to wait for a request? I mean, how does that all tie together, I guess, bottom line?
There's a lot to that. So the city does require annexation agreements. So several of those properties signed annexation agreements several years ago when they signed on to our electric.
Okay.
I believe, I'm not sure there's a water line there though, but I do know there's electric. So there are some annexation agreements already on file for that street or block. The city's not been aggressive with annexation. We've really let property owners lead that, and that's what's happening in these cases for the most part. I don't know if that really helps answer your question, but the city definitely has people sign annexation agreements, and they can be triggered at any time they become contiguous, such in this case.
And I take it you don't need to be aggressive if you're already supplying the utilities and you already
Correct.
have those agreements in place, so, okay.
Correct.
I get it. All right, that's helpful, thank you.
Well, although Abhishek raises some interesting points that had not come up before, I think for purposes of this property, we don't have much choice except to follow the rules and procedures and the ordinances that are in place at this point in time. We certainly can discuss these things further, but we do have a set of laws basically that govern the situation for this piece of property, this particular piece of property.
And I'll remind you, you are making a recommendation to council, so you're not making any final decisions. If that helps, maybe give some more thought to it.
Any other comments or questions?
Could we, sorry,
That's
could we, like, suggest different zoning, maybe like R3 zoning? And because again, like, if there are more houses in a property and that is in coordinates to what the city is trying to do with, like, reducing having more construction, like, lot sizes and stuff. So to me, having more people in place will certainly be beneficial because more people will get houses. It will increase the supply of the houses, essentially become affordable, but also increase the revenue, and more people live in the city is good for the city, right? So to me, kind of, there is no I totally get, right? Like, essentially, there's not much to it to annexation, but I think what is to it is how many people live there.
So I think you're talking about interim zoning next, unless you want to combine that with
Yeah,
this
yeah.
conversation. I would, reference the memo that I had wrote for the packet that references our land use plan, and that's where I take my guidance to give to you and how you want to make that decision.
I'd keep them separate.
Okay, well, I would think, I'll make a motion that we recommend to city council that we annex these 4 pieces of property.
I'll second it.
Ms. Broadwell,
Yes.
Ms. Ennis,
Yes.
Mr. McComber,
Yes?
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Stalter,
Yes.
Mr. Waddle,
Yes.
Mr. Body.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0. Next, we move to the interim zoning, which has already been brought up a little bit. I'm not going to read off the parcel numbers again with all the zeros.
But you do that so well.
I'm counting real quick as I do that, Judy.
I can tell.
The property has an agricultural use currently, as Heather has explained to us before and again, that she's required to recommend the zoning that is most closely associated with the current use. But we don't necessarily have to go that route. And we have on several occasions followed the request of a property owner as to what zoning they would prefer to have for their property. Not unusual that in a case like this, that the Mowers want the R2 medium density zoning. It's kind of consistent with some other parcels that have come up in the last couple of years. So any comments about the interim zoning from other members of the commission?
Yeah, so I think our difference between R2 and R3 is R3 will be more number of houses and R2 will be lesser number of houses, right?
In R3, you can have multi-unit dwellings. So it could be an apartment complex, or it could be a one-unit dwelling. There's more allowable residential uses in R3. And then I would make sure to point out too, in the memo I gave you, that future land use map has this as that yellowish, greenish color, which is suburban, single-family residential with retail permissions. So I would always defer to our land use map to use that for guidance. And if you, in the future do decide to amend that map, that we could do that or make that recommendation to council.
So the map suggests that this should be R2.
I would say either R1 or R2 because it says more suburban residential, so that is not a high density to me. That's, to me, a lower or medium density.
Can I ask a follow-up? And was there a cost benefit done to this kind of map? Like, was there a thought behind, like, how much it will take to drive the utilities and public service versus how much revenue we'll be getting from them?
No, it did not go that deep. However, our future land use plan that was passed in 2014 does have a dedicated page about annexation, and Julie and Judy probably remember being on that committee
Yes.
to review that plan and be very involved we talked a lot about annexation and how complicated it is and that we do need to be careful. So it's definitely, the city does recognize that. That's really important to evaluate each request.
Let me just go back to something that you said earlier. So you think if it's a R3, that there would be more units, so the cost would come down for people? Because, did I get that correctly? So you're
Yeah, no, I mean,
that you're concerned about bringing the cost down so that these homes don't turn out to be 400?
exactly. I mean, and again, like it's a benefit on all respects, right? I think like we need to be a little bit creative with how we're doing things, right? So if there is already an R2 and there are multiple R2s, why don't we have some new R3s? Also, it's a simple, I mean, I'm not a builder or a construction person, far from it, though I do DIYs at home and I develop taste for it. It's simple, like more houses means there will be more just supply more, demand lesser, and I mean, or demand same, so the cost of construction will go down because the houses are smaller. It's also, sits well with how things are. People don't want to live in giant houses anymore, and there's cheaper to heat them, cheaper to cool them. So yes, to me, that's a win-win for all. More people living here, more house availability, and more affordable houses. And we have a 67 acre of land which we can play with. I mean, not play with in that way, but maybe look for some collaborative collective ideas.
Well, I mean, I'm all in favor of finding more affordable, although I think there's a new phrase for that. It's not affordable, it's something. I can't remember, somebody said, where's,
There do seem to be some smaller houses being built in the Two St. Springs right now. And, the buyers can decide what size house they want. I think people are wanting bigger homes, 2,000, 2,400 square feet. That's a lot of the reason the costs are so high, because people expect more today than maybe us old people did when we were young. So it's just and they don't seem to mind these huge mortgages and rents and things like these Redwood apartments that are around are $2,000 a month for rentals in some of them. So it's maybe a different expectation now, and people don't want to start small and work their way up. I don't know how you legislate that, or if you should.
So the question is whether we recommend R2 or R3 zoning, essentially. So it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Am I correct, Heather, in thinking that anything that could be built under R2 could also be built under R3?
Not necessarily. For example, one difference would be you're allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit in R2, but not in R3. You could have a bed and breakfast inn in R2, but not in R3. R3 allows a multiple unit dwelling and a nursing home, which is not allowed in R2. You could have a parking lot in R3 and a parking structure, but not in R2. You can have, a similar thing would be you could have a 2-unit dwelling in both R2 or R3. And that's basically it.
So we only recommend to the city council, and city council will finally decide the zoning.
Correct. I mean, another option is you just leave it agricultural and recommend that, and then the owner can come back later to change the zoning.
Those of you who have not expressed an opinion yet, do you have one? What should we vote on here? The R2, R3, the A1?
I think if the owner wants the R2 and they're going through the process, I don't see why letting them have that or putting it, giving them what they're requesting. I don't see a reason against it, because they're the ones that, ideally are going to be investing in this, and as much as I see a lot of Abhishek's points on this stuff, it's pretty market driven. And in the end, even if it goes through, we recommend it, council passes it, in 2 years, they're gonna come back and change to get what they want anyways.
I would recommend the R2. I agree with
Yeah.
Joe. I think the R2 makes the most sense.
Okay, well, let's go about it this way. I will make a motion to recommend to city council that the interim zoning be the R2. And we'll see how the vote comes out here.
And I will second that.
Ms. Ennis? We voting?
Judy?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Mr. McComber?
Yes?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Stalter?
Yes.
Mr. Waddle?
Yes.
Mr. Body?
No.
Ms. Broadwell?
Let's say yes.
All right, motion passes 6-1. Now we move on to a topic that we started last month, talking about vape shops. Heather, you want to say a few things about changes you've made and so forth?
Yes. So I really just took your feedback from last month and made a few minor changes. I don't know if I'm on the right track. Obviously, you can tell me if I am or not, or what changes you want. But I did add tobacco or vape store as a conditional use in the central business zoning. And that is under section 150.42, the comprehensive use table. Then I added a prohibition of walk-up and drive-through windows under 150.69C. I know we talked a little bit about that, not in depth. I saw another couple other codes. I thought maybe that's a good thing to at least run through and see if you like that. And then added requirement to post regulatory signage at public entry doors under 150.69E, which I know Julie had brought up a couple times at the last meeting. I made it very general because I thought, I don't think we need to determine people's signs for them, that they could at least, incorporate the language as long as they're incorporating what we say that we want in the code. And then we worked with our GIS department to come up with a few maps. And we put those in your packet. So the first map, and let me get my bearings here because it's too small to see on the screen, so I gotta get my map out here. So we titled that Exhibit A. And what we did was we took the existing vape shops and drew a 1 mile buffer around those. So you can see by looking at that would essentially leave maybe a few spots to the east, maybe one to the north and one to the west where additional vape shops could go. That would be new. So the 1 mile is not necessarily prohibiting anymore. The second map, labeled Exhibit B, is basically imagining a blank slate, so no existing vape shops, and using all of those community-oriented facilities that are mentioned in the proposal, which, daycares, schools, libraries, and churches. And we may have missed a couple here and there, but we came up with about 56 spots that we thought would apply to that 1,000-foot proposed buffer. And that's what that map looks like for that buffer. I don't know if that really captures what you wanted us to do, but we did our best to try to translate that.
Okay, let's talk about the maps a little bit more here.
Yeah.
I think, Mr. Waddle, you were really the one that pushed for that the last meeting. But as I look at Exhibit A, just want to make sure I'm interpreting this correctly, Heather. The blue dotted line around the exterior of the map is the city limits, right?
Correct.
Okay. As I'm looking at it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only substantial area that is not prohibited is to the west side of the city. It looks to me like there's a fair amount of space in that area.
Well, we did pull up or mark the 4 zoning classifications where we're proposing that they be allowed. So commercial, central business, interstate commerce, innovation, and employment. And so the white space really doesn't mean anything for this
Oh, okay, I
purpose.
see. The white space is the wrong
It's not
kind of
zoned
zoning.
properly. It wouldn't be zoned properly.
Okay, I didn't
So, yes,
figure
so the
that.
colors basically mean this is where
Okay.
a vape shop could potentially go or tobacco shop.
Right.
So really, like I mentioned, very small edges on the
Yes.
north side of town and the east side of town and a
There's
couple on the
more
west.
east than else.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you do exhibit B,
I mean, really, bottom line, in looking at this, if you could put one that might fit in the one square to the west, like, I don't know, is that at Reedy's or something? I think, probably, okay. So that would be essentially the only one that could be added beyond what's presently in place, correct? I mean, am I reading that right? Is that a fair
Not
assessment?
necessarily, no. You could have more, closer to Newton, where you see the zoning there, the orangish
okay.
color. And that likely is well over a mile apart between to the north and the pinkish colored commercial zoning that you mentioned.
Okay.
So you probably could do 2.
that's in regard
To the
to 1
west.
mile.
Yes. And to the east, you could probably maybe do 2 or 3 because that's quite a distance there to the north. And then basically our business park there is to the east where there would be that type of shop allowed. And then you probably could have one more at the southeast corner of the city where it's zone commercial.
Okay, so in this exhibit A, on the east side of the city is it number 2, Cosmic Haze. That's the one that's closest to that side of the city,
Correct.
right? So if you sort of go further east or a little northeast or southeast, the limit there, that's 1 mile from Cosmic Haze.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
You might be able to get one, or you can get one, possibly 2 into
I see what you're saying.
into the innovation and employment zone on the east side of the city.
Okay.
So Heather, I probably missed this because I was not present in the meeting. Say there is already existing business. They decide to have it's primarily a different business and they decide to keep vapes with them. Will this apply to them as well?
No, only to shops that we're considering this is their primary sellable product. And we wrote that in the definition.
Right.
If you saw that, or we tried to be comprehensive. So we just said a retail establishment dedicated to the display, sale, distribution, delivery, offering, furnishing, or marketing of tobacco, tobacco products, et cetera.
Okay.
So,
So like a gas station can keep it
correct.
as along. So, okay, so to me, the issue is more about the visible nuisance of a shop than the product itself. Because if we do apply this in this ordinance, then there could be other creative ways to sell the product, which will bypass this, but probably not create the visual nuisance of a vape shop. Because I already know one shop which has it, which is not primarily what they do. And I was thinking about this and thinking about this ordinance. The other issue is, and I'm just gonna be a little clever here, in our previous argument, we are arguing against market. Like, we should not interfere with the market, free market, and I get that, and in this one we are. And I do know that market will always beat us in regulations. Like, in the sense, they will find creative ways to figure out how to, right? And we might become, so like for me, we tried to simplify the zoning laws and all this stuff, and now we are again back to complicating it again. And we complicate it more, and in that process, they will still find some loophole, then we will have another rule for it, and they'll still find some loophole, and it's like an unending quest. I'm all for it. I don't want kids to smoke vapes. I don't smoke it. I hate it. Actually, I'm allergic to it. But I also think that we have to kind of take a step back, which was I was trying to say. If we are interfering with the market, at least we have to think about what will lead to the greatest good of the greater numbers, right? So can we find ways to increase the cost of operations on someone who's running a vape shop, which will de-incentivize them rather than having more regulations? Could we also find to provide incentives to other businesses which may help the community? And I think of a bakery for that example, high cost of running, low profits, but certainly everybody loves fresh bread. So again, like I'm with you, right? I'm with everyone to have ordinance, but I also think that this is defeating the purpose of simplifying regulations. And there will be loopholes, which we just figured out one right now. I can just have vape and I'm selling beer. The other issue is obviously the bars. There are bars here, right? So then we start regulating bars.
Well, we regulate a lot of things in the zoning code.
I know.
And this is our daily job in planning department, is people trying to get around things. I hate to say that, but that's just, when you try to enforce rules, it's always upsetting someone. So we do regulate adult-oriented businesses, and it doesn't seem like much people really have concerns with how specific that legislation is. I mean, that's 4 pages of regulations that, I don't know if that's much different in my mind, but we can regulate certain uses, and we're able to do that to make our community, what we want it to look like.
It is a bit bothersome to me that even if we regulate the vape shops, that you've got all these ancillary stores for which it is an ancillary product, and they're not contained within those regulations. So you've got 30 some stores that fall into that category. Also, I was noticing and looking at the municipalities, that you looked at the ordinances in other municipalities, it makes this subject somewhat difficult because there's a lot of variation from place to place. And I don't think anything, as I looked through it, I didn't see a definite pattern where you can say, well, everybody does this, and this. It varied a lot from place to place. One of the one of the issues where it varied quite a bit was the 1,000-foot buffer between hospitals and libraries and youth-oriented activities. Seemed like about as many municipalities went with 500 feet instead of 1,000. It was pretty evenly split between those two numbers. I wondered what the map would look like if we did the GIS thing for 500 feet.
Well, we thought that might come up, so we do have that also.
Great.
She's good.
Heather, while that's being passed out, some of the other municipalities had discussed how many vape shops per number of people in population. I don't see that here, and I can't really remember what we came up with last time. It does seem like, and I apologize, because when I saw the map, I didn't really understand it either. Seems like with these buffers, we can still have quite a few more shops come in, which I thought the purpose was to keep the numbers where they are, and then if someone closes up shop, that another one wouldn't come in. But maybe I'm not still looking at the maps right, but what did we discuss? Does anyone here else remember what we talked about vape shops per population? Because other cities did that.
I remember it, Julie, is I don't think we came to any real conclusion. We did bring it up and talk about it a bit. And there's another area where there's quite a bit of variation from one city to another. You know, one city says one vape shop per 1,500 people, another says one vape shop per 10,000 people. I do see with this map with the 500-foot buffer that it does open up quite a few
Yeah, it
spaces
does.
compared to the 1,000-foot buffer.
It does unless these other businesses stay in business.
Well, what do you mean, Bob?
Well, with the mile buffer between shops.
Oh, okay, mile, you're thinking that, okay, I see what you're saying. But
Yeah.
looking at the mile buffer.
Right.
We could have showed that on here, but we were just so fearful of getting these maps so complicated. It's hard, just to send you a packet and then not be able to explain it, so.
So what is the requirement, since so many of those shops are already in place? If the ownership changes, does that essentially set them back to zero and they're not able to operate as that type of shop? Or is it, as long as that type of business is continuous, then they can switch owners every week if they want? Is that essentially
That's
the way it
how I
works?
would translate it. I mean, if it's here now, it's a legal nonconforming use and it could change hands, just like, a legal nonconforming house can change hands and it still remains.
Okay.
If it closes
Stays with
for
the
a
property, it
year
doesn't
and then
go
tries
with
to
the owners.
reopen, how would we handle that?
I think we say 6 months.
6
So
months.
if they're not actively trying to repair it or rehab it or, you know what I mean, and get it ready for the next owner or business, we would definitely say it's voluntarily being discontinued. And it's really hard with non-conforming uses because Ohio law is really heavy on private property rights, and they want voluntary discontinuance, not, the city coming in and saying, okay, you lost it. That leads to lawsuits. So we would definitely err on the side of the Ohio Revised Code and follow that voluntary discontinuance.
There's just so much variation between the options in a number of different areas that, for me, it's hard to focus in on something and say, okay, this is the way we ought to do it.
Well, as
I-
a reminder, you are making a recommendation to council, and they'll have the final say.
Yeah, I guess my feeling, Bob, is that after looking at these, essentially what you've put together is meeting what your goal was. And, there's still some opportunity in place, but yet it's restrictive enough that it's stopping every corner. So I'm essentially comfortable with where you're headed and what you've done to this point.
I thought one way to approach this and as to what we would recommend to city council would be to go through your proposed legislation item by item and say, is there a majority of us that are in favor of keeping this restriction in the recommendation?
I think that's a great idea. Yes.
Of course, we still need to have a public hearing, right?
Correct, yes.
That would be in August.
Well, I would plan on having the public hearing at our next meeting. We could hash this over meeting after meeting,
Right.
just spin our wheels.
Yeah, I would go for the public hearing so that we can make some decisions.
So I can just dictate that we'll have a public hearing at the August meeting.
Okay, yeah, that'd be August 6th, I believe.
Yep.
But thank you for all the information you did provide us with, Heather, and for taking into consideration some of the comments we made the last time.
I'd be open to ideas, but like I say, the thing that crosses my mind as a way to go about it is after the public hearing, is to go through your proposed zoning code amendments one by one and see if there's a majority of us in favor of each amendment, or if there are any that need to be changed, altered. I mean, we could alter, for example, maybe 6 of us would want to say instead of 1,000-foot buffer, we have a 500-foot buffer, or some other such thing. But take it item by item and see what a majority are in favor of, and then make that our recommendation to council.
Well, do you want to go through that quickly now so that that's essentially what we would be taking to the public hearing? I mean, I guess my feeling is I'd like to see something that goes to the public hearing that we all feel pretty comfortable with. We may not all agree with every piece, but at least it's something there that the public's gonna come in and see versus, boy, they could throw on a million different ideas to Heather and to us, and we'd be starting at square one. And I just, again, I personally feel comfortable with what you guys put together and showed us. I think it matches the parts and pieces that you wanted to deal with. And if we want to tweak those some, but just have something in place to show the public. That's my feeling. Again, I don't know how the rest of you guys feel.
Well, it's pretty short. I mean, it's not, I think, overly complicated was our goal.
The rest of you okay with doing that? Can we
Yes.
sort of vote without really officially voting, Heather? Or not, this is not our recommendation to city council.
Right.
But we're
Right.
trying to see where, what our tendency is at this point prior to the public hearing.
Sure, and I can make any changes that
Yeah,
majority would like to see changed.
okay, well, let's see if we can go about that now. Works. What I suggest then, first of all, we've got section 150.69A. That's basically the 1 mile buffer. Is everybody in favor of that, or would you be more interested in a different number? Like, I suppose if it was something different, it'd be smaller.
I mean, it pretty much excludes most of the city.
It does exclude most of the city.
And, you know, if you're doing one of the, it looks like we've got, so you've got 1 mile exclusion of other vape stores, and then you've got this exclusion of 1,000 feet against, you know, civic uses.
Right.
As it were. I mean, it's pretty much blots out the entire thing.
Yeah, if you put those two together, there's not much
There's nothing left. And in my mind, to me, I mean, I would strike A and go with the 500 foot to start. See where that goes. It leaves it open. I'm kind of the mind that we've already saturated and that they're just gonna start going away before too long anyways, but.
Would you stick with the 1 mile buffer?
Between, well, I think it's to me, it's one or the other. Like if you're going to exclude based on proximity to each other, then let's do that and pick that distance. Or if you want to exclude based on proximity to civic uses, then let's pick that. It seems redundant to do both.
Okay.
I think we do need to do both.
You think we do need to do both? When we looked at other municipalities, I do think most of them tended to do both. All right, well, let's, just count noses. Abhishek, start at your end and go this end. Are you in favor of the 1 mile buffer?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, Tom, what do you think?
No,
No, you don't like it?
no, I think it's too exclusive.
Too restrictive?
Yeah.
Mr. Waddle,
I'm okay.
you're okay with it. Judy?
I'm okay with it.
Joe?
Not,
Not? Couple?
Yes.
Julie's a yes. So that's 4-2. And it'd still be a majority no matter which way I voted. I must admit, I'm very close to being on the fence about that. It bothers me that it's so restrictive, but 1 mile did seem to be the distance of choice in most municipalities. So, okay, we'll leave that alone for now, not hearing an outcry to the contrary. Now the 1,000 foot buffer. I'll start at the other end this time. Julie,
I also like that.
you like the
Yes.
1,000?
I would be more inclined for 500.
Okay,
I really agree with 1,000 foot.
okay. Bob,
Same here.
okay. Tom,
I think 500 would be better.
okay. Abhishek,
1,000 is fine.
Okay, well, we'll stick with the 1,000 then, because again, it's the same breakdown as before. Is everybody okay with the not allowing the walk-up windows and the drive-through windows?
Yes.
I suspect that
Yes.
nobody objects
Yes.
to that, right? Okay, not serving in-person customers between 10 PM and 8 AM. Again, I suspect everybody's probably okay with that.
Yes.
Feel free to tell me if I'm wrong.
I mean, just from a business standpoint.
Can I ask
most of
a
your business is
clarification?
going to be at night. I think you could move that up between probably noon and midnight.
I just have a question here when it talks about a tobacco or vape store. If you're going into the gas station,
Not even part of it.
You know,
that's not even part of it. So
No.
you can go to the gas station and buy it, but you can't buy it if you're going into the store.
right.
Is that my
Yeah,
understanding?
I think your understanding is correct.
Okay.
Can I, so why is it in person? Like they will just not serve anyone? Is like they could order online and they can deliver to their house?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. So if you're ready to spend more money, you can get it. But if you don't have the money, then you just wait till next morning. I mean, that's how life works, I
Or hope the
guess.
product you want is at the corner convenience store.
Yeah.
But there's still, people still get it, but they're just try paying more to it. It's little, against the poor.
It's true.
Okay, how about party, the signage that's required? Must state the legal age of purchase and that minors may not enter the premises unless accompanied by a parent or legal guardian. Anybody not in agreement with that or want to change that? All right, again, the signage and the lighting in Part F. Is that acceptable to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, Part G, the non-conforming, legal non-conforming use.
Yes.
And then the definition of a tobacco or vape store.
Good. Yeah, fine, yeah.
Heather, I think you hit it on the head pretty closely. No hue and outcry about any of the sections that we've included in here. So I
Okay,
think
well,
we
that makes it
start with-
easy.
I think we start with that for our August 6th meeting.
Okay.
Okay. I'll end our discussion for tonight then on this topic. And what we have left is, Julie, do you have a report from the Zoning Board of Appeals?
Yes, I do. There were 3 variance requests. Nicholas Bolus of 929 Sand Ridge Road requested a variance to allow the construction of a 25-foot by 35-foot parking pad in the front yard, which would be a location that does not conform to Section 150.72 off-street parking. A parking pad is allowed in the side yard or rear yard. There was a lot of discussion regarding this. The vote ended up to be three for that and 2 against. So that did pass on a 3-2 vote. The second one was Laura Trendler of McBride Dale Clarion on behalf of 711 Speedway had requested the following variances to allow new construction at 1650 East Worcester Street. The first was to exceed the 60% maximum total lot coverage allowed in the IC Interstate Commerce District by 16%. And in parentheses, 76% of the parcels would be covered by impervious surfaces. And 2, to exceed the maximum outdoor lighting level of 5-foot candles under the proposed auto fuel canopy, which would allow the use of 43-foot candles maximum. which would be with an average of 3 5.86-foot candles to be used. The third request was to allow the construction of 4 wall signs. Signs would be 1 sign at 45.86 square feet, 2 signs at 49.1 square feet, 1 sign at 61 square feet, and then, so those are 4 wall signs, and then 1 canopy sign, which would be 24.55 square feet, which would exceed the maximum number of 3 signs allowed per business, which it would exceed it by 4 signs because there's a proposing 7 total signs. The existing legal non-conforming pylon signs are approximately 120 square feet and 200 square feet in size. And then the last request was to allow the total sum of all signs to exceed the 336 square foot maximum in the IC Interstate Commerce District by 214 square feet, which meant proposing 550 total square feet of all signs. So again, we spent a lot of time looking at this. Part of it is that they, because it's 7-Eleven, they're going to be putting in a restaurant, and so requesting signs that would be visible no matter which way someone was coming to the building. And that was unanimously approved, all of those at 5-0 vote. And then the last one was Ali Berkes, on behalf of Quick Trip, requested the following variances to allow new construction at 120 Freeway Court, which is over by the Holiday Inn. I think that's what that's called over there. To allow the construction of a 58-foot, 8-inch by 124 feet, 2-inch accessory structure, which is an auto fuel canopy, and a 31-foot, 6-inch by 114-foot, 8-inch accessory structure, which is diesel, for the diesel truck, so a diesel canopy, which would both exceed the 18-foot maximum height by 7 feet 6 inches. It would be 25 feet 6 inches tall. So that was our first request. And then the second one from Quick Trip was to allow the construction of a 79-foot by 113-foot travel center, which would exceed the 60-foot maximum front yard setback by 105 feet from the front property line along East Worcester Street and by 88 feet from the front property line along South Dunbridge Road, which is a corner lot. And that was approved 5-0.
Okay, thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Heather, do you have anything else for us tonight?
Yes. Okay, fairly brief, but so far our total permits are at 208 compared to 215 at this time last year. However, we've had 37 single units, so basically housing starts, compared to 19 at this time last year, so that's more than double for the number of housing permits. We've had 1 multi-unit permit, which is within the R3, none at this time last year, 0 commercial as far as this year compared to last year, and then 1 building in the innovation and employment zoning, and also 1 at the same time last year of the same. And then we've had 2 institutional zoning permits compared to 0 at this time last year. As far as permits issued since our last meeting, we did just issue a permit for new construction, town and country animal health care to be located at 811 South Dunbridge Road. We actually signed that this morning. And then we issued St. Aloysius Church. They're doing a small addition and alteration at 150 South Enterprise Street. As Julie mentioned earlier, we are working with Quick Trip still. We are close to issuing that permit since they received their variances. We are just waiting on their financial guarantee for the work they're doing in the right-of-way to get filed with the city. We're waiting for revised plans from Tin Man to do an addition and a warehouse there at 1358 Bellard. Working with Pioneer Packing on an addition at 510 Napoleon, waiting for resubmittal plans for that. Bowling Green High School new construction, we're close to issuing that permit. They do have their permit for, they can start some site work there, but we're close to issuing their permit for the actual new high school. And then we're waiting for revised plans for Bowling Green Senior Living, which is new construction of 66 dwelling units on South Main Street, which would be near Aldi or behind Aldi. We do not currently have any subdivisions under review. Access management policies and guidelines, the work continues on that document. Subdivision regulations, we are updating those, as I mentioned. We put a request for proposals out on June 16th, and we had the proposals due on July 17th. We received one so far that I'm aware of, so we hope to get more of those to review. And at a near point in the future, we'll be asking for a volunteer from Planning Commission to likely serve on a steering committee that helps us review those subdivision regulations and make recommendations on the final draft. I also wanted to include in your little packet here an update on the South Main Improvement Project, which you probably have encountered that continuous construction work. But I thought this was a nice handout to give you that really shows the progress there. I think it really does meet our recent community action plan and our future land use plan as far as adding over 80 trees to that corridor and a shared use path and 2 additional crossings with pedestrian hybrid beacons. So I think it's really important that Planning Commission's aware of those improvements, and the public, of course, and that we're really trying to implement the plans that we've had in place. It takes time, it takes resources, and of course, money, but we are, seeing those improvements be implemented. So I think we'll all be excited when South Main Street's done and improved, and we see a lot of people using it and different users, whether it be a bicyclist or a pedestrian or a vehicle. City Council, they have public hearings scheduled for the placement of 416 West Wooster Street on the local historic register, which includes the historic overlay zoning, on July 7th at 6:30. They'll also be reviewing interim zoning of 2 properties on Sand Ridge that you reviewed a month ago or so. So that's it as far as my report, unless you have any questions.
Okay, a lot going on. No questions for Heather? Anything else for the good of the order tonight? All right, then I move that we adjourn. Judy
Oh, I'll
seconded,
second it.
and the vote was 7-0.